Just want to
All
shut.
righty.
There we go. Okay.
You good?
Yeah, I'm just shutting down my trading platform because it takes a lot of memory. Okay.
Oh, got it. That's a good idea. Yeah, if you've got anything you need to close, you can close it down.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, perfect. All right. Hello and welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I am an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am so excited to bring you my friend, Mitch Russo. Mitch and I met recently, probably a month or so back, through our mutual mastermind group. And it's been really fun to get to know a bit more about Mitch, and we'll get into some of that. But to introduce Mitch, Mitch started, I actually love the story about how he started, so I'm going to make him tell us a bit more about that as well. But he started a software company in his garage, and originally this had to do with tracking time, right? Time tracking. And being in the legal field, like we had a good chat about this because that can be problematic and hard to find software that really meets your needs. Well, Mitch just went and built it out of his garage, sold it for 8 figures, and then went on to work directly with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes to build a $25 million business together. Nominated twice for Inc. magazine's Entrepreneur of the Year, Mitch helps companies scale rapidly. Mitch's first book is The Invisible Organization: How Ingenious CEOs Are Creating Thriving Virtual Companies. And he's here with us today with a new book called Power Tribes: How Certification Can Explode Your Business. The other thing that I happen to know about Mitch that I love is he is a phenomenal photographer. So I hope we get to talk a little bit about that today, because when we first spoke, I went, of course, and immediately looked up his photography site, and I basically wanted to order like 8 billion prints. So good work, Mitch. It was really, really fun to explore your photography. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's great to be here. You talk about my favorite things, and I love business. I love helping people, but boy, my photography is truly my passion in life, and I miss it a lot right now. So
I can relate to that.
yeah.
Photography for me started young. I was a little kid, and I would find these old like the Kodak, the little clicker cameras, Instamatics, and the little, plastic pocket size ones you could carry around. And I'd buy them up. I didn't know how to use them, but if I had 25 cents or whatever, I'd get all these little Kodak cameras. And when I was about 8 or 10, I started to actually buy some film and learn how to use them. And it's really funny looking back on some of my early photos. But I came from a family of 6 kids, and so I would make all my siblings be my subjects, and I learned portraiture that way. I'd drag them down to the basement,
Oh,
turn on lights. So I
yeah.
share with you a big love for photography, and it started really early in my life. But I'm a big fan of anybody who has photography as a creative outlet, because I think it's just such a wonderful way to explore and share the world.
Well, I of course agree. And, it's funny because we started it very much the same way. I was a little boy, and I saw my dad had this thing, and it was a Brownie camera. And so I took my allowance and I bought a kit from the drugstore. It was a roll of film. No, I'm sorry. The film was separate. It was a packet of developer, a packet of fixer, tiny little plastic trays, and then I exposed the film. And in my basement, I sat there dipping the film in these little tiny trays in the dark. And at about 10 years old, I developed my first roll of film, and then made contact prints, and I was hooked. That's all it took. As soon as I saw that picture emerging from a blank page, it fueled my desire to do more and more and more. And eventually I built 5 dark rooms throughout the years that I've moved. My last dark room was an absolute beautiful commercial grade dark room. And my new house back in 2003, 2004. And then eventually I got very allergic to the chemistry, and I bought a digital camera. I tossed it in my bag as I was leaving for Morocco, never realizing, I forgot almost that it was there. And I used it for the first time in Morocco at the Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca. And when I got home, I said, oh my God, I'm selling all my film cameras.
Mm.
And that was the beginning of moving completely into digital way back then.
Mm. Well, there really is something magical about developing images yourself. And I didn't start as young as you did on that path, but when I got to college, I was a business major, but I kept trying to enroll in a photography course at school, and I finally got into it, but it was my last year of school.
Mm.
Because I wasn't an art major, they didn't let you have priority as, if you were enrolling in photography as an elective, which it was for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally got in, but I lived and breathed photography on the 2 days a week that I had the class. And then I just lived in the dark room. And that's
Yay.
all I did. And you're right, it is so addicting and so
It is.
amazing to be a part of that process. And the transition to digital for me, like I was really reluctant to make that leap. But
Oh, me too.
yeah, once I did, it simplified things in a way. I guess it makes your digital life more complex, right? With all the imagery you have to track and capture and store.
Yeah, but for me, it was, it was the quality. I
Yeah.
mean, I was formatting with a large format camera. I was addicted to resolution. And
Mm,
this was even back then when the Canon 5D was just released. It was just 12 megapixels. But what I saw in those images on my crappy old computer screen compared to my 4K screens now, but what I saw on those screens back then, I knew. I knew that this was better than medium format, and that it would only get better from here. And that's why I said, that's it. And of course, the other thing about it was that I can carry this tiny little SLR with one lens, instead of a 30-pound backpack filled with, basically old style metal cameras. So
yeah.
anyway, so
Yeah, it's a big upgrade. Well, that's fun. And I mean, if you're open to sharing your photography website, I'd love to include it in the links that I put into the show notes.
sure. Yeah,
It's just
it's
super fun for people that want to see some of Mitch's work. I think it'd be really fun. So stay tuned, but you can catch the show notes at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. So Mitch, switching gears, let's
mhm,
talk about that period of time when you were creating software in your garage.
mhm. Yay. Well, I mean, back then it was everybody was creating software in the garage. It wasn't like I had done anything really that special. Uh, I was a working guy. I mean,
Mm.
I had a job. I was a salesman in the semiconductor industry, um, and I had an idea for a product, and I, sat down with my next door neighbor over breakfast, and we brainstormed about it. And then 6 weeks later, he called me over and said, "Come on, I want to show you something." And for heaven's sakes, he built it. I mean, it
Oh,
was like, what? But he built
yes.
it on an Apple II. I didn't want it on Apple II. I wanted it on a PC.
Mm.
So interesting thing happened right around that time. My industry was crashing. Now, I was really a novice salesperson, but I was an electrical engineer by education. And so I went to the Dale Carnegie sales course to learn how to sell. And then I realized that selling is like engineering. It's a very step-by-step process that if you simply follow the steps, I'm a systems guy, so just follow the steps and you'll close sales, And so, I mean, everything was going great, but then the industry crashed. And I went from, at the time, now remember, this is like 1970s, 80s. I mean, I was making back then about 34,000 a month in commissions, which was insane. I didn't even know what to do with it. I was literally putting it into passbook savings accounts. And when I hit 100K in each of these banks, I just throw the little booklet in my sock drawer. I wasn't even sure if I found them all at one point. So, I mean, that's how unsophisticated I was about money. And so I called up this guy and said, "What's going on?" And all my orders just got canceled. He goes, "Yeah, we're going to go through a downturn, but don't worry, it'll come back in 5 or 6 years." I said, what? He goes, yeah, it happens all the time, every 5 or 6, 7 years. And I said, oh, okay, thanks. And I said to myself, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And that's when this whole thing with the business really kind of took shape. So it was a crazy ride. We had, at that point, we worked sort of as a skunk works. I'd work my job during the day, so would my partner. We come home at night, we would stay up all night testing and writing the documentation. And then we both burned the boats. We quit our jobs. We're stuck on the island now called Entrepreneurship. And the next day, the IRS relaxed their rulings on contemporaneous record keeping, which was entirely what our product was built on.
Right. And I was going to say, you had intended to build this product to serve a very specific purpose, right?
Yes.
Related to your work. And then it totally went away. The purpose of it just dissolved overnight.
Right. So, and this is a great example of entrepreneurship. So what did we do? We screamed at each other. We blamed each other. Then we took complete blame and said it was all our fault. Then we threw things around the house for a little while because that was kind of fun. Then we went out and we had several beers and
Calm down
to each other. And then we came back. And we said, okay, what do we do next? We got this great piece of technology. What do we do? And in that one day, imagine going through this entire range of emotions and circumstances. And that one day, we came up with the idea of taking our incredible time tracking technology and building time and billing software for lawyers and accountants.
Yeah, people who needed it.
Yeah, and thank goodness that the IRS did that, because that would have been a pretty shitty business, to be honest. It turned out that the time slips business was incredible, and it was an adventure that I will never forget, and it was one of the highlights of my business life, and one of them because I got very lucky later on in life to work with Tony. But it was just one of those things where I look back, and to this day my partner is still my best friend in the world, and we do things together. We've been to each other's funerals and and weddings and families, and amazing.
No, I love that. Well, and I appreciate you saying, thank goodness the IRS did that. I mean, I think in the midst of chaos and crisis like that, right? Here you guys had quit your jobs, done this thing, and then the IRS says, just kidding, we're not requiring that anymore. Nobody needs this. But then out of that came this massive opportunity because you guys reevaluated it and turned it into an opportunity. And I think that's a really powerful reminder, even for people right now going through, some crazy times. I think it's important to remember that there is still opportunity, and what feels like crisis and craziness right now can be shifted at times into some of our greatest opportunities.
Absolutely. And what it really comes down to, and this is the thing, a lot of the lessons for me came later, not in the midst of it,
Right.
But for me, one of the lessons was we did not quit, and we could have. I had a lot of cash in the bank at that age. I had a couple $100,000 in the bank. To me, that was
you were losing your cash into drawers.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, hey, I could go on vacation for a year and not even turn around. I could go get another job. But I really wanted to start a business. I knew in my heart of hearts that true freedom lies in having your own company. And then, of course, I told my dad about it. He goes, well, what do you mean? He said, you're going to quit your job? And I said, well, yeah, Dad. I mean, look, come on, you did it. You have your own company. He goes, I know, but I have this thing. What do you have? And my dad's a jewelry, very gifted. He was a very gifted jewelry designer, and for him and in his world, he was well known. We go to a magazine stand and he'd go, yeah, that's my cover there, that's mine there, that's mine there, and that's mine. And all of the women on these fashion magazine covers were wearing his jewelry. So then he said that to me. I said, Dad, I'm going to do this, and if you feel like helping me, that's great. If not, no problem. I'm doing it anyway. So I was determined. I was focused, and I basically cleared my pathway of distraction. So I remember after we finally got the business really restarted, I had a date with my girlfriend that Saturday, and she stayed over Saturday night. Sunday morning, she gets up and she goes, "What are we going to do today?" I said, "Well, you're going home. I'm going to work." And she says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I got a business to build here. I don't know what you were thinking." She goes, "Well, I thought we were going to spend the day together." I said, "I don't think so." And she says, "Well, when can we spend the day together?" I said, "I don't know if we're going to be able to do that for a while." And the last thing she said as she slammed the door behind her was, "Well, then call me when you get some time to spend with me."
Mm.
And I don't remember if I don't think I ever did actually call her because we just plowed into it. And it's the determination, it's the drive, it's the
Mm.
desire. If you have
Mm.
these things, and listen, don't be mistaken, you're going to make mistakes,
Right.
but never quit. The job of an entrepreneur is to pivot into success, because we don't get to choose success. As you probably know the story, Heather, the founder of FedEx, Fred Smith, got a C on his master's thesis for the idea of Federal Express. And no one really understands the story. The story is because his master's thesis was a plan to have planes with check processing equipment on those planes to fly checks around the country so that the time a check would clear would go from 8 days to 1 day. And the only element of that entire plan that survived going forward were the hubs.
Yeah.
Everything else.
Interesting.
So his professor said to him, "Hey, genius, how much does that equipment weigh?" He goes, "Well, I'm not really sure." Turns out the equipment and the paper of the checks themselves, the plane wouldn't fly. So, I mean, but
Yeah.
the hubs
We're a
were the key.
genius. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. Well, and it's yes, I believe that there is, you just cannot have enough perseverance when it comes to entrepreneurship. And you make another really good point about people often not understanding the path, right? Saying like, "What? You're going to do what?" And I think a lot of entrepreneurs face that at some point in their path when they make a choice to go out on their own, quit their job, do whatever it is that they're about to do. And for me personally, I think that's actually one of my favorite parts about entrepreneurs is the courage that it takes to make the choice, right?
Well, that's right. And as they say, and I don't know who said it, but it's something I have lived by for many years, is that your greatest accomplishments are on the other side of fear.
Mhm.
And if you're not willing to move through fear, then you will never accomplish anything, because playing it safe and being comfortable is the exact opposite of what is entrepreneurship.
That's right. That's right. And I think something slightly less than 10% of people ever, you know, build something, create a business, go into an entrepreneurial path on their own. So it's a definite minority, and I love people who are entrepreneurs. I love the courage that it takes to make that choice. Now, looking at where you're at now, right? And you've had a really fascinating, interesting time. I mean, you've done some phenomenal things in your work. Talk to me about what your love is right now when it comes to supporting other people on this path.
Huh, wow, that's a big topic.
Yeah.
So I'll start by saying that I love to help entrepreneurs
Mm,
break through and grow. I get more pleasure and satisfaction out of that than any other activity. So
mm,
I've authored several books. I like writing, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing compares to the feeling of helping another person move to the next level in their lives and help them as they move through that fear
mm,
themselves. And so what I've been working on is I've been attracting clients who have been disrupted by COVID. And I basically put together a system where we can get them back to where they were and sometimes past where they were in about 60 days. And it's called my revenue disruption program. And it's been a lot of fun running it and perfecting it. Now I got people signed up where we just take them right through. 60 days later, they are booking clients and selling courses and doing all the good stuff that we know in our world makes money. And it's kind of cool because some people were completely. I mean, I had one client who basically was making a nice living from stage for decades, and COVID hit, all his stages disappear. And we're on the call for the first time, and I said, "Well, tell me about your business." And he goes, "I don't have a business. I never did. All I did was work through booking agencies who would book me and send me checks." So I said, "Okay, well, we're going to change that." And we did. And it practically makes me cry to hear him tell me what's happening now in his life when clients call, and he's following the pathways that we designed together for him to up level each of his clients, to the next level and the next level and the next level. And he's an incredible individual, and he's created some amazing intellectual property that will change lives. So, and that's just one story. So I love doing that. That's
Mm.
my favorite thing. I have some specialty things I do, like my certification programs. I build certification programs for and with companies. That's what my book, Power Tribes, is all about.
I love that. Well, and backtracking just a second for the folks that have been disrupted by COVID, right? And are having to try to figure out either how to regain their balance, create new business. Are these people that were already in the consulting industry? Are these folks that have had to totally transition from what they were doing before?
It's a combination. I have
Mhm.
one guy who really had never really been even on stage. I mean,
Mm,
he had basically made his business by setting up hundreds of small groups all over the country. He has this amazingly powerful meditation technology, but it requires that he does it with a physical demo. So,
ah,
so he was generating six figures a month with all these other folks out there helping him and doing this. Of course, all that went away instantly. And so what we did is we basically completely took everything and built online platforms and training systems, and we repurposed a lot of what he had done before into ways that people can get the same results, not as
mm,
quickly or even as elegantly in some ways, but he's doing it now. When this happened, he was basically broke
mm,
because he had spent, like me, and I'm sure like you too in the beginning, we invested in our own businesses,
that's
and
right.
so if all of a sudden someone just pulls the plug, you're kind of dead in the water. And like many restaurants, I'm sure, Heather, in your area, I mean, these folks were just left stranded. I mean, some of them had food in the freezer and refrigerator, and I mean, they was just shut down. And so he was in the same position, but in a matter of 60 days, we got him back up and running. His revenue isn't where it was, but it's getting there. And that's
Hmm.
just so exciting.
Oh, I love that. It's, the way you describe loving helping somebody on that journey, building. And for me, my personal belief around entrepreneurship, around business is that it's one of the pathways for us to express our greatest good in the world.
I think so. I think you're right.
It doesn't have to be exclusively that, but I really, and like hearing the way that you can support people doing this just brings me so much joy, because I think like the ripple effect of what that does, not only on his life, but the way that he's able to support his family or at some point give back to community, like all of this just becomes a bigger and bigger ripple effect when we can serve people building good businesses, doing good work.
Yes, and that's part of the joy that I have is watching those ripples. And the other thing is that I don't really operate like other people. So when somebody signs up to work with me, they sign. I have a little contract. I should ask you to take a look at it, but it's a crappy little contract. It basically obligates them to a certain amount of money. It obligates me to a certain amount of time, but I
Mhm.
never stick to the time.
Mm.
My goal is the end result. So when someone signs up with me, my belief is that I'm really not done until we have the end result. And some of my quote unquote coaching friends say, well, that's no way to build a business. And I said, I don't care. That's not what
Yeah.
I'm here to do. I already made my money. I sold my company and retired at 44 years old. And so I'm not really in this for the extra dollar. I don't
Mm.
mind making money like anybody else, but and it's not my primary goal anymore. It hasn't been for many years. My primary goal is to express myself in a creative way that helps others or brings them joy. Whatever that turns out to be, great.
I love that. I similarly, and I think people, it's funny because I just recently, like about a month ago, I ran a workshop for people. And again, I did a special because of COVID, because of the amount of pressure that people are under to get businesses online, create revenue, like do the thing that they've been wanting to do that maybe they now have to do. I ran a workshop for legal protections for online businesses, right? And ran a whole group of people through this and kept emailing all of them after the workshop. Like, did you get the documents done? Are they plugged in? Hounding them because I care that if they're going to invest in putting the support in place, that they take it across the finish line, right? Because that is what matters. It doesn't matter if you're halfway there. It doesn't matter if you paid for the thing if you never actually get the result. So I'm with you. But I'm sure your clients really appreciate that about you.
Well, it's funny because I have a client who is one of the most successful asset protection attorney law firms here in Florida.
Mm.
And we were chatting one day, and I asked him, tell me about this is one aspect of the business. I said, I know you build these amazing asset protection plans and you speak all over the world, blah, 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 blah. What is your experience working with clients? He goes, well, I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, we build these very beautiful plans. They're perfectly designed. They're customized exactly for each individual. And then they don't implement them. I said, what do you mean they don't implement them? He goes, well, they're supposed to do things like rename accounts or file, to and
Transfer
all.
things into the
Yeah,
trust. Like,
yeah.
yes.
They just don't do it. I said, but you're pretty expensive. I mean, they paid you a lot of money. He goes, yeah, I know, but they just don't do it. I said, that's so interesting. But it's again, it's kind of human nature. So many
Mm.
people are not taking action, if you will. They don't move into that next place. And I don't know why. That's an area I've never quite uncovered. I mean, think about all of the folks who bought courses and never even cracked them open, let alone finish them. I mean, there's
Right.
something here. And that's why I've found over the years that information by itself is not that valuable. Like in my Power Tribes book, I practically give away every single thing I do in my standard 100K program. I mean, who in their right mind would do that? But the fact is I've only known a handful of people who have taken the book and implemented. And
Mm.
even now, I at one point I tried to teach what I do as a course at a very high price, and still nobody followed through. That's why I work with somebody. Part of what I do, maybe the most valuable part, which I hate to say, is keeping them accountable
Right.
and pushing them to the finish line and doing that final launch and watching as hundreds of thousands of dollars pour into the door for a program that we just spent the last 3 months building.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think there is something really, I mean, for all of us in the online space, that the point you made about people buying courses, having like literally having the tools at their fingertips that could really revolutionize any part of their life, right? But I think it gets to some very deep aspect of behavior change and our psychology and just the way that humans work, right? We can gain a certain momentum when we have the activation energy to make the choice, but doing the follow through and staying committed, like there's so much that feeds into that I think makes it really challenging for people to stay the path. And which is also why, even in regards to this podcast, one of the themes that I care deeply about is this idea that whether it's entrepreneurship, building a business, being a committed parent to, your family, or whatever else it is that you're doing in life. Like, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not like you show up for 2 days and you get amazing results the rest of the week, right? So,
That's right. For
yeah.
sure. I want to take that theme one step further. About 3 years ago, I was about to click the button and buy another $2,000 course on the internet. And I stopped myself and I said, wait a minute, before I buy this course, why don't I go back and finish some of the other courses that I bought? So I open up my spreadsheet and I take a look, and there's all the courses that I bought. And I've actually finished several of them, but not all of them. So I picked one and I reached out to the company and said, look, I'd like to finish the course. I would like to hire a coach, and they said, well, we don't have that. We don't do that. I said, okay, good. Well, how about, can you connect me with another member who's already been through the course so we could be accountability partners? And they go, no, we don't do that either. And I thought to myself, maybe this thing with accountability could help a lot of people through this. So I actually invented accountability tracking software called resultsbreakthrough.com. And I released it and nobody bought it. Nobody. And I started to do research. I said, okay, well, people say they want accountability partners. They want to be held accountable, but they don't follow through. So then I thought, well, okay, well, this reminds me of the early days of CRM. CRM was, salesmen said, hey, I just want to sell. Don't make me learn how to use this software. So I went to the companies that sold courses and I said, hey, I got this software that will almost guarantee that more people will finish your course so that they can buy the next one. Wouldn't you like this? And they go, yeah, this is great. And several of them bought my software and then deployed it throughout their population. And guess what, Heather? Take a guess.
I don't know. Did it work like magic? No, still
Nobody
didn't.
used it.
Mm.
So I basically abandoned it. I said, you know what? There is something going on in the psychology of the population.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not my field. I don't know what it means. But I will tell you this, a lot of people are reluctant to follow through or have an accountability partner. And, one theory I have is maybe it's just this whole social media. Maybe our attention span has been so devastated by cell phones that
Mm.
we don't have the focus anymore. I don't know. But I will say this, when people are determined, when people are focused, that's when amazing things can happen. And that's what I love, to be involved with people, whether it's helping them or partnering with them. I mean, I love partnering with somebody who's as determined or even more determined than I've ever been. That is a thrill. And that's what I
Yes.
love to get involved in.
Well, this idea of commitment, because really what this is all about is like, are we committed to creating a result, creating a change, building the thing, like whatever it is that we think should come next? And I think there is something there. I mean, I think generally a fair number of people just want band-aids. They want to be able to like kind of crack the door open and say, I tried, or I looked, or whatever. But when it gets down to like how truly deeply committed are they, if life is just consistently getting in the way, then the commitment level is just not that high. And so I know, because I've debated this issue even in my own business, right? How do I help everybody get across the finish line? And maybe the reality is that I don't, if people want it, it's there. And it's really interesting because next week I'm actually kicking off this. It's just a personal passion project that I started in the midst of COVID as a way to support women with creating change, substantial change, when we're just under, and you and I have talked about this, we're under extraordinary pressure. We don't have normal supports. You can't travel, you can't get out and go do some of the things that bring you so much joy in your life. I know for me as a mom, being home like literally 100% of the time with two little people and doing all the things, momming, working, making meals, clean, like it all lives in the same space and all at the same time right now. And the reality is that, at least in the near term, there is no end in sight for this. And
That's right.
so right? So the only way to change our relationship to that reality is to go in and to go deeply in and to consistently do that work. And so that's what the Leap Lab is about, kicking off next week. But as I look at that, like, I know that when you do the work, and when I talk about the work, I mean like do that inner work of evaluating your
Mm,
values and how you're performing and what your commitment level is to various things in your life and how that relates to your goals and, everything that you're doing. It's so easy for that type of work to be pushed aside during times of constraint and pressure. And so for me, selfishly, the Leap Lab really is also about this idea of accountability. If I
mm,
lead another group through the work, like, I will show up and do the work. And that really feels like a gift to myself right now, because I haven't been able to carve out that space so far to do that. So, it's, I think that the pressure in life is real. Like, I don't want to discount the fact that for people that are not getting to the thing that they want to do, like, the pressure is real. I don't think it's a choice that they're really making to ignore certain things. I think that there's a lot that goes on in life that gets us off course, and that we just have the opportunity over and over to reevaluate, how do I want to do this? Do I want to keep
exactly.
going down this path of struggling and not getting to it? And so, like you mentioned, it's a real joy when people show up prepared to do the work and go
Mm,
through it with you to get across the finish line, because it is the exception, not the rule.
that's right. And honestly, I don't know how women do this. I mean, to have children and to be cook and cleaner and mom and run a company, run a business. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine doing this, and I know you're in the thick of it, and I know you're not alone. There are many of you with young children now struggling like crazy
Mm-hmm.
to try and just keep up, and I just can't imagine. It's so hard, and then of course, you have everything else in life that goes on too. Everything. You have husbands and you have weather. I mean, we had hurricanes here recently. I mean, it's
Right.
it's like, can we
I
get
know.
can someone cut us a break sooner or
Oh
later?
my gosh. Well, and I just have to insert yes to that point of, like, can we just catch a break?
Yeah.
We have in Washington, we've got this like super mega killer wasp that has shown up.
Oh, I saw those.
You saw that, right? And I
Yeah.
literally, like, the day, what is funny about that is the
Oh,
day that happened. And I think when that hit the news here in Washington, I want to say it was maybe
yeah.
May, June. And I just thought, like, are you kidding me? Are we living in Jumanji? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
But it was the one thing that, like, took it over the top, where I just had to laugh. I just had to be like, this is our reality. We now have like killer wasps moving in. And the crazy part is that the other day, actually, no, it was the middle of this week. My day's almost together. Like,
Of course.
where am I? Is it Friday?
Right.
Is it Monday?
Right.
But we had something really weird fly into our yard that was humongous and looked like a wasp to me. I know the difference between a wasp and a bee. I've lived my entire, most of my life here in Washington.
Hmm.
And sure enough, I had to race my kids inside. It was very aggressive, like wasps are, flying right up to our faces. And anyways, when I looked it up online, I can't tell if it's one of those killer wasps, because a variety of
Oh,
images come up, but there are killer wasps from Asia that look like that. I was like,
oh my
oh my
goodness.
gosh,
Yeah.
please don't tell me that I can no longer send my kids outside to play right now, because that literally might put me over the top.
I hear
So
you.
I know it is just crazy times. And I think it's a reminder that, anytime where we're feeling pressured, we have an invitation to do the work and to dig in and to change our reality by changing ourselves. Um, Really quick, I want to touch on this concept of the power tribe. I want to
Sure.
hear from you, because I love the title of it. I love the work that you do in helping people take their work even to new levels and distribute it in bigger ways. So talk to us a little bit about power tribes.
Well, let me just make one quick comment
Yep.
about what you said before.
Yep.
With all of what's happening in this world, with incredible floods in China, where dams are
Mm,
about to burst, with chaos all over the world, and I believe that this is all coming to a head. I believe we're in a great period of incredible change. And I'm optimistic. I believe on the other side of this, we will reach a place where humanity will evolve to the next level. I don't know how. I'm not trying to figure it out. All I know is that from the standpoint of energy, this is exactly the path that energy takes before it transforms into its next level, if you want to use those terms. So while I see it as chaos on a macro level, on a much larger scale, it's positive. And I believe that by holding that viewpoint, we will evolve in that direction much quicker, as opposed to trying to figure it out, which we can't do. It's not part of what we're here to do. So,
Well, and I appreciate you making that point, because I mean, even one of the things that I want to cover in the Leap Lab that starts next week is this idea of like how co-creation and manifestation happens, right? And
that's
I've
right.
seen it really powerfully work. And giving up on having to have the how is essential, because if you get stuck on the how, you don't make progress. You know, you're too busy down in the details to actually allow for what comes next. And I also think that giving up on the how allows us to hold on to hope,
That's
right?
right.
And allows us to hold on to the idea that, and you know, and I also really appreciate what you say about like holding on to that vision and that reality is way more likely to make it so. And I believe that as well. If there is a whole bunch of us that believe like, look, what's coming next is growth and improvement and evolution, then we will help to co-create that.
Exactly. And that's part of what I think we're here to do. I
Mhm.
don't think that the chaos is anything more than a distraction. I know it's a very severe distraction,
Right.
ultimately, I think it's the evolution of spirit, of our energy, of our
Mhm.
beings moving through this period to evolve into the next phase. That's my belief, and I'm sticking to it. So
Mhm.
there's. But to answer your other question about
Yes.
certification, so I want
Yes.
to be clear about something really important. Certification is a fairly mechanical process. You do a bunch of stuff and you have a program. I I cover that, and that's really, it's important, but it's not really why
It's
I
not the
do this.
point, right? It's
That's
not,
right.
yes, it's the tool, it's not the point.
Right. The point is to create vibrant, thriving communities that are self-supporting and nourishing to its participants and to the company that hosts them.
Mm.
And, the reason I know this is because the first one I built wasn't. And it evolved or devolved to the point of complete chaos and
Mm.
lawsuits. So, I mean, there's no better way for me. I'm the type, I need to make mistakes before I learn. I mean, I was the kid who had to touch the flame on the stove just to see if it's really as hot as my mom said it was. So for me, when I built my first certification program, I had 60 angry people describing circumstances that they had to go through with my quote unquote certified consultants. And
Mm.
my determination was so strong. I was so convinced that this was a great thing to do that I called every single one of them and I figured out what went wrong with
Ah,
each individual certified consultant and client.
what a fascinating learning experience.
Oh my God. And it took me 6 months to recast the program completely into
Mm.
one that created a foundation. And some people might say it's a spiritual foundation. I believe it's a cultural foundation. I believe that before you even conceive of really a business model, which is part of the joy for me of doing this, you got to think of the community, and the community
Mm.
is, as I love Jay Abraham's term. I think he uses the term Parthenon. So to me, a Parthenon is a structure with a big solid roof and columns all around. Well, the Parthenon, the culture Parthenon to me is a group of values, key core values that are aligned at the deepest level with the CEO and the company, And the columns are the code of ethics that support those values. So we start there. We start by extracting what those values are. And I've worked with CEOs who've had companies that are 20, 30 years old. They never thought about this before. I mean, they have them, but they just never articulated them in a way that anybody would want to listen. And so we get those really, really, really right. And then I give them the core value. I give them the code of ethics. And from there, we modify them to make sure that they're a perfect fit. Modify, subtract, add, make sure they're a perfect fit for the Parthenon, the culture Parthenon they are creating with my help. Now we have a basis of building a program. That's how we start. The next step is to look at the company and the business itself, and we ask the simple question, where does certification fit? If we had this army of people that are willing to do whatever we ask them to do, as long as they can make a living doing it and enjoy the process, what are we going to ask them to do? And so we look at the business model, and this is where, for me, the joy of it comes, because what I do is I open up my heart and I feel what's best for this company, and I find things that were completely uncovered before. I don't want to make it sound like I'm bragging. I'm not. I'm just being aware. It's sort of like forest and trees. I can walk into a company and see things. I'm sure, Heather, you're the same way. You could just see stuff that's there because people aren't, they're too close to it. So
that's right.
I see all these opportunities, and we map them out using mind maps and flowcharts until eventually what we have is this incredible plan that, if we can execute, will generate hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars every quarter and create these multiple streams of recurring revenue, all stemming from certification. But here's the best part. And this again goes back to what I said earlier. It's the communities that we create. It's the families that we nourish and help, because when we build a certification community, we have hundreds of families that are being fed and nourished by these communities, hundreds of relationships that will endure even the company. I mean, I've had CEOs tell me that their certified consultants are more important to them than their own employees, because they're beyond loyal. They love the company and they love the CEO. That's the goal.
That is in and of itself a big conversation, like everything that you touched on there. I quickly want to say that, first of all, I love that it starts with the conversation around values and ethics as the building blocks to everything else, because I think it is really easy to assume that you have those or that they're built in when they're not. And you don't realize that until things start going wrong and you're forced with making decisions. And if you're not on track, like, things can go sideways in a hurry for people if they do not have a foundation that is very specifically laid out and built on that.
So true. And there are common, simple mistakes that by human nature we will make that will destroy a tribe. And it's so important to be aware of these. I'll give you one very funny example, if you want to think of it as funny. So I built this amazing tribe of certified consultants for my first software company. And then one of the people in the group said to me, Mitch, your product's not in Spanish. Let me translate it for you, and I'll deliver the entire completely laid out manuals. You could just publish them and everything will be perfect. I said, wow, that's really nice of you. Thank you very much. Well, now what I just did was I created 2 levels of certified consultants. One is friends of Mitch, and the other is everybody else. Well, Mitch has gotten, I'm doing this for Mitch. And then somebody else came forward and I said, oh, sure, you'll do that? Great. Yeah. Before I realized that I had infighting going on between these classes of people. Now, it's a simple thing. But so how do you fix something like that? Well, now that I told you this, you'll never make that mistake, number one. Number two, the way to fix it is to say, well, that's a great idea. Thank you so much. How much would you charge to do that? And they say, well, Why dollars? I said, well, great. I'll tell you what, let me put an email out to the group, see if anybody else would be interested in participating. And we can actually put together a small cohort and pay everybody to get this done, benefit more people that way. Now there's no caste system anymore. There's no
Mm.
FOMs. There's just all of us together working towards a common goal. I had a client just yesterday say to me, well, if we're going to convert these folks to certified partners, I should recognize the ones that have already been around for a while. We'll give them gold badges and call them, ambassadors or something. And I said, nope. You can send them a nice new iPad as a thank you, but you're not going to do that. And he said, why not? And I said, and I told him the story I just told you. I said,
Mm.
because we're not creating multiple levels here. We're not creating in groups that will cause fighting. We will not be doing these things that I've learned the hard way are going to crush you. So
Yeah.
please just follow my lead on this. And he goes, oh my God, I didn't even realize it. That makes so much sense. And
Yeah.
so, unfortunately, I don't know where you learn this stuff unless you experience it yourself.
You learn it in a family of 6 kids where you figure out in a hurry, around fairness, right? It's really this issue
Yeah,
of fairness and the
it
fact that
is.
it's human nature that we all want to be treated fairly, right? And unfortunately, it can be painful to learn that life is not fair and this is not really the way that it goes. But you're right that we have an opportunity to build that into our system in advance before we learn out how painful it is to get it wrong.
That's right.
Yeah.
And another thing around that same idea is that we have to be clear that we cannot accommodate everybody. In
Yes.
other words, we love everybody and we hope everybody is happy and comfortable, but we cannot accommodate everybody.
Yeah.
And what that means is that certain people will have to be told that I'm sorry, but maybe this just isn't for you. And if you understand that going in, then it allows you to stand firm in your own convictions and values. And that's
Right.
another very important, hard won lesson because so many of us are people pleasers and want to please everybody. And particularly since they already paid us $25,000 a year to be in our program, we want to please them. Well, no,
Yeah.
that's not the way to go. And the reason it's not the way to go is because that's how you devolve into complete chaos by trying to please everybody.
It's true. One of the modules in the Leap Lab it's at the very end, but it's actually one of the most important parts is this idea of boundaries. And the only
That's right.
reason that we have boundaries in our business, in our personal life, anywhere is because we have clarity first, right?
That's
We
right.
we decide what works and what doesn't. That often comes from painful experiences.
Yes.
Yep, it does. But once you're there, man, it makes the path so much smoother, so much like you just have so much more momentum without these unnecessary obstacles. So yeah, I love that point. So Mitch, I know before we wrap up, a couple things. I know you've got a gift for folks, and I think it's
Yes.
the link I will share for folks that are listening and you want to check out Mitch, his work, his various links as far as where you can find him online. This link is poweredtribesbook.com/8 steps, but you will find that alongside the show notes at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Mitch, tell us a little bit about this gift.
Well, it's a very, so here's the thing I learned a long time ago. Um, if you make something easy to understand, then people will get it. And so what I tried to do here is, and I use an infographic because it's convenient, but I try to distill the core values of a tribe into this infographic. And so it's really a very simple thing. It's probably a total of 200 words, if that many. But if you look at it and you think about each of the steps, they lead directly to where you need to be. And again, if you're thinking about building a tribe, even if you're not thinking about certification, please take into consideration the points that you'll see on this infographic because it makes for a happy group.
Mm.
I'll never forget this. I made friends with the CEO of Intuit many years ago, and he called me up out of the blue and he said, "Mitch, what are you doing with this certified consultant thing?" And I told him, and he goes, "Well, can you share that with us? I mean, can you teach me how to do it?" I said, "Sure." And of course, I realized I now had a person that I could ask a favor of, later. So I taught him how to do it. It became the Intuit Certified Advisor Program,
Mm.
which is now thousands and thousands of certified advisors. And here was my favor. I said to him, Scott, can I link time slips directly into QuickBooks without having to export a file and import it and this and that? And he goes, well, we don't really have that facility. I said, I know. He goes, let me see what I could do. I got it.
You got it. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's a long time ago,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
and he's not running the company anymore. I think he's the chairman. But it was great to see how my system became really exploded. I mean, I had 350 certified consultants. He
Mm.
has something like 6,000 certified advisors. So it's exciting to watch as these ideas take form and take life. And I get to do that all the time now. I get to help people build programs and they just come to life.
Mm.
And that to me is incredible.
Yes. Oh, how joyful to be able to see your work taking roots in the world and spreading and serving all over the place. Well, I love that. For folks listening, make sure that you check out his gift, 8 Steps. And then, Mitch, before we sign off, what final thoughts do you want to leave with people who are listening today?
Well, I think the most important thing I could say to anybody is that you have greatness inside of you. We all
Mm.
do. There isn't a single person born today that cannot accomplish amazing things if you believe that you can. And
Mm.
it's nothing more than a change of your mind. You could change your mind and become successful. And I just want to encourage everyone to please do that, to please find a way, find a mentor, find a podcast, find a coach, find something to nourish your soul so that every day when you get up, you believe in yourself more than anything. Because unfortunately, that's all we got, guys.
Yeah.
We got ourselves. So if we don't believe in us, who will?
Mm. That's a beautiful message. The reality of all we have in this life is ourselves. Like I learned that lesson when my mom passed away, but it was both heart-wrenching to be with the truth of that, right? In her final days, seeing that she really truly was alone, even though she was surrounded by family. Nobody could go through that experience with her in the way that, you could really be with her. She was alone. And yet there was also something about the recognition of that truth that was absolutely beautiful and empowering at the same time. Like, you know what?
Mm,
That's right. We do have ourselves, and that is something that we can always rely on.
that's right.
And the truth about it starts with your beliefs. The piece that I want people to understand is a belief is a decision.
That's right.
It's a decision. And if you're being challenged right now by your beliefs, you have to make a different decision.
Another way to think about it, Heather, is that a belief is nothing more than a thought that you keep thinking. And if you change that thought, it doesn't have to be a belief.
That's right. That's right. It's literally just digging in, understanding what beliefs are getting in the way of something and putting some light on that and making a different choice about what you're going to tell yourself and what you're going to believe each day. So I love that. I think it's
Exactly.
a really powerful point to end on. Mitch, so great to see you. Great to connect with you again. I loved this conversation, and I'm so glad we get to share it on the Guts, Grit, and Great Business podcast. Thanks for joining.